So that's right. I didn't talk about Newton and the apple. You always hear that. There's lots of cartoons and mentioned in a lot of places. Did that really happen? Is it just a myth? Or is there anything to it? And so there are some things too. We can't just dismiss it out of hand. Newton himself wrote about the apple. In his version, he's working on the problem of the moon and its orbit about the Earth, and he's gazing out the window at his grandmother's farm, and there's an apple tree out there. To this day, there's an apple tree out there that's from Newton's time, and he happened to see an apple fall from the tree. And he realized that maybe the force making the apple fall from the tree was the same force that was directed toward the center of the moon's orbit, causing it to fall around the Earth. Because we know the moon would go in a straight line if there was no force on it, so did Newton obviously, and the moon curves so it falls below that line. So Newton thought gravity might be an inverse square law. He knew how far an apple would fall in 1 second, and so he calculated how far the moon would fall in 1 second too, using the inverse square law, compared the two values, and they were exactly the same. And so that convinced him that gravity was an inverse square law, and he applied it to a lot of other problems, and that led to the development of Newton's universal law of gravity. Now the problem with this is Newton wrote about this late in his life. And so he was probably suffering from dementia, not all there. Other people had written about this story, and people had probably asked Newton during his lifetime about, was there an apple involved? And maybe he just heard the story from so many people he started to believe it himself. And so from that, we're really not sure what happened. I myself don't think it happened because it was a random chance event having a major influence on history, and I just don't think that can happen. So for example, if Newton's looking out the window and just before the apple falls, his grandmother says, "Isaac, lunch is ready," and so he turns, doesn't see the apple fall. Never solves the problem of the moon, doesn't get that inspiration. When Edmund Halley came to him to ask if he'd ever worked on gravity and was it an inverse square, he would say, "Well, I did, but I never really got anywhere with it." So Halley would have left unsatisfied. He wouldn't have helped Newton publish the Principia. No scientific revolution. The Industrial Revolution retarded maybe hundreds of years, and you guys are about ready to go out and water your horses. So I just really don't think that a random chance event could influence history. Keep going. Then again, maybe it did happen. Okay, here's what I've done to the apple. I took some Scotch tape and taped a washer to the top after removing the stem. And then I'm showing it next to the Timothy Ferris book. I base a lot of my biographical lecture about Isaac Newton on. So now I'm going to climb my ladder up to the apple tree, which is up there. And you can see on the ceiling is an electromagnet. And the power supply to the electromagnet is located in a place off to the side of my room. And so the electromagnet will be on, and I will hang the apple there. So I have the apple hanging from my electromagnet. You can see the wire that goes along the top of the ceiling. You can see I have one of the ceiling tiles out, and so that's where the apple is so students don't see it. So this is what I use to turn the electromagnet off when I want the apple to fall. And so it's a X10 transceiver module. There are a lot of different products like this. And I have this little handheld remote. And so I can turn the electromagnet on and off. And so I have this remote in my pocket and trigger it when I need to. I have the power supply back here in my little side room. So that wire you see connected to it goes all the way and up through the ceiling. But I'm sure that you can, looking at your room, figure out a way to hide the power supply and hook the X10 or whatever sort of remote control thing you get up to it. So there are a lot of remote control lamps, things that turn lamps on and off and so on. So here you can see the ceiling tile I leave out where the electromagnet is. It's up there just past the pipe. You can see it in another part of this video. And so you can see the way my room is, there's a ceiling that's over the students, and then I have this cutout, and then there's this little wall, so that hides it further. But I used to teach in another classroom where I didn't have that, and I just left the ceiling tile out all year. And if you really went and looked, you'd see the apple, but by that time they were never looking, and so that hides it up there. So if you have a false ceiling and you just take the ceiling tile out and just leave it out all year, there are other things you can do to drop from the ceiling. They won't be looking up there.